is Christine being held to a completely different standard? The Heather Wyatt double standard no one wants to talk about. Okay, y'all, I want to have a conversation today that I already know is going to make some people uncomfortable. And before anyone misunderstands what I'm saying, let me make this very clear. This is not a video telling you to blindly support Christine. It is not a video telling you that Christine cannot be questioned. It is not a video saying Heather Wyatt should automatically be condemned. And it is certainly not me saying these two situations are identical. They're not. But what I am talking about is something much bigger. The double standard in how people decide which mothers deserve grace and which mothers deserve suspicion. Because when I look at the way Heather Wyatt was treated compared with the way Christine has been treated, I have to ask, why does one mother get the benefit of the doubt while the other seems to have to fight for the right to be believed? And more importantly, why does the conversation surrounding Christine so often become about Christine instead of remaining centered on Nolan? That's the part I don't understand. Let's talk about the difference in the standard. One thing social media has taught me is that people don't actually apply principles. A lot of people apply preferences, and those are two very different things. A principle says, I believe grieving mothers should be given compassion. A preference says, I believe grieving mothers should be given compassion when I like them. A principle says, we shouldn't assume we know everything from social media. A preference says, we shouldn't assume anything when it benefits the person I'm defending. A principle says, people deserve to tell their side of the story. A preference says, people deserve to tell their side when I already sympathize with them. And that is where I believe the hypocrisy comes in. Because when Heather Wyatt was facing controversy, there was a very strong instinct among many people to rally around her. There was an immediate willingness to hear her, to defend her, to contextualize her behavior, to explain that people didn't know what was happening behind the scenes, and to remind everyone that she was a mother dealing with an extremely difficult situation. And again, I'm not saying that compassion was wrong. I'm saying, why wasn't that same intellectual generosity extended to Christine? And I know this is where people say, Lay, you can't compare them. I know. That's not the point. I'm comparing the treatment, not claiming the circumstances are identical. There is a huge difference. You can have two completely different situations and still observe that people are using completely different standards to evaluate the people involved. That's basic critical thinking. If person A makes a statement and everyone says, we don't know the full context, but person B makes a statement and everyone says, see, that's proof she's lying, then the question isn't necessarily who is right. The first question should be, why are we giving one person the benefit of the doubt and denying it to the other? That's what I'm asking. Because look at what has happened with Christine. Christine lost her 18-year-old son, Nolan Wells, after he went missing during a 4th of July trip to Horn Island. His body was found July 6, and the circumstances surrounding his death have generated questions and conflicting accounts. His parents have publicly said they want transparency and a complete investigation. That's not some wild conspiracy theory. That's literally what they have publicly stated. Christine told Good Morning America that the family wanted honesty, transparency, and a full investigation. The family has also pointed to discrepancies in accounts surrounding Nolan's final known hours. For example, Christine has questioned claims that Nolan voluntarily stayed behind on the island, particularly because of questions surrounding his phone and conflicting accounts about what happened next. Now, here's where I need everyone to use their brains. You don't have to automatically agree with Christine. You don't have to automatically believe every theory, and you don't have to conclude that foul play occurred. You can simply acknowledge that a grieving mother has questions, and those are two completely different things. And the harassment Christine Wonsley is receiving proves the double standard. And this is another part of the conversation that I don't think we can ignore, because at some point criticizing Christine and outright harassing her became two completely different things. Christine has publicly shown that she received disturbing hate mail at her home while grieving the death of her 18-year-old son, Nolan Wells. The anonymous sender mailed a defaced photograph from a press conference involving Christine, her husband, attorney Ben Crump, and Reverend Al Sharpton, with markings that appeared to mock the family's efforts to get answers about Nolan's death. The envelope reportedly had no return address. Go figure. And here's where I need people to really stop and think. You can disagree with Christine. You can question her statements. You can question the family's theories. You can believe investigators should be allowed to do their job. And you can even believe that some of the family's public claims need more evidence. All of that is fair game. But sending hateful material to a grieving mother's home because you disagree with her advocacy is not accountability. That's harassment. And it gets even more serious. Mississippi officials have acknowledged that threats have been made against people connected to Nolan's case, including witnesses, their families, public officials, and the Wells family. The FBI has been involved in examining interstate threats connected to the case. Officials have also warned that some of the threats are direct. So when people say Christine is just playing victim because people disagree with her, that's not an accurate description of what's been reported. There's documented evidence of harassment surrounding this case. There has been hate mail, there have been threats involving people connected to the case, and Christine has reportedly faced attacks against her professional reputation as well. People reported that the family's attorney said people were posting negative reviews on Christine's workplace website after she began publicly advocating for answers about Nolan's death. Think about how insane that is for a second. A woman loses her 18-year-old son. She's publicly asking, what happened to my 18-year-old healthy child? And people become so angry with her that they're allegedly going onto her professional profile and attempting to damage her livelihood. How does that help Nolan? How does that solve anything? How does that produce evidence? It doesn't. It simply punishes the mother for refusing to stop asking questions. And that is where my argument about the double standard becomes even more important. Because imagine if this were Heather Wyatt. Imagine Heather was grieving and people were sending hateful material to her home. Imagine people were attempting to damage her professional reputation. Imagine strangers were threatening people associated with her situation. Would we be telling Heather, well, you made yourself public, so deal with it? Or would everyone immediately say, leave this woman alone, she's grieving, this is disgusting? I think we already know the answer. And that's my point. That same humanity needs to exist for Christine, not because she's automatically right, and not because every statement she makes is automatically factual. And not because questioning her is forbidden, but because being questioned and being threatened are not the same thing. Being criticized and being harassed are not the same thing. Disagreement and intimidation are not the same thing. And if you genuinely believe Heather deserved protection from that kind of behavior, then you have to believe Christine deserves it too. Otherwise, you're not defending a principle, you're defending a person you personally identify with. And that's the problem. And that's the problem, because principles don't change depending on whose name is attached to the situation. If harassment is wrong when Heather experiences it, it's wrong when Christine experiences it as well. If threatening a grieving mother is unacceptable in one situation, it's unacceptable in another. If destroying someone's reputation during a traumatic situation is cruel in one case, it's cruel in another. You don't get to move the goalposts because you don't like the woman. And there's another important distinction. Some people have taken Christine's public statements and turned that into justification for the treatment she's receiving. And I've seen the logic. Well, she shouldn't have said this. She shouldn't have posted that. She shouldn't have posted this. She shouldn't have brought attention to herself. She should have kept quiet. But let's apply that logic consistently. Does making a controversial statement mean you consent to being threatened? Of course not. Does publicly asking questions about your child's death mean strangers are entitled to terrorize you? No. Does disagreeing with someone's accusations give you permission to attack their workplace? Absolutely not. And if someone believes Christine has crossed the line, there are appropriate ways to respond. Correct her, challenge her claims, present evidence. Defend yourself. Let investigators investigate. But threats, hate mail, attempts to interfere with someone's livelihood, that's not debate. That's intimidation. And ironically, all of this proves another point I've been making. Some of you vigilantes out there are more concerned about Christine versus what happened to Nolan Wells. Because instead of you focusing on what happened to Nolan, we're not talking about what did Christine say? Who is Christine fighting with? Who is attacking Christine? Who is attacking the people connected to Nolan? Who is making threats? And suddenly the entire situation becomes another internet war. But Nolan is still deceased. His family is still grieving, and there are still unanswered questions surrounding what happened to him. So here's where I stand. Question everyone, investigate everything, verify every claim. Don't blindly believe Christine, and don't blindly believe everyone else either. But stop pretending that harassment is accountability. It isn't. And stop pretending that because you disagree with Christine, everything happening to her is somehow deserved. It isn't. Because if we can look at one grieving mother and say protect her, give her grace, let her speak, she's going through enough, then we should be able to look at another grieving mother and do the exact same thing. And if you can't, then be honest. You don't have a standard. You have a side. And that is exactly the double standard I'm talking about. And there is something about what we're watching happen to Christine that feels disturbingly familiar to me as someone who understands Mississippi's history. And let me be very clear, I'm not saying that what is happening to Christine is the same thing as slavery, Jim Crow, lynching, or the civil rights movement. Those comparisons would be historically irresponsible. What I am saying is that there is a recognizable pattern in Mississippi's history. When Black people spoke up about being mistreated, the response was often not to immediately listen to them. It was to intimidate them, discredit them, silence them, or make speaking up so costly that they would eventually stop. And Mississippi has receipts. After Reconstruction, Mississippi enacted laws and systems designed to strip Black citizens of political power. The state's 1890 Constitution used mechanisms such as poll taxes and subjective literacy requirements that were disproportionately used to disenfranchise Black voters. But it wasn't just laws. There was intimidation, there was economic retaliation, there was violence, there were threats. And there were people who understood that if you could make someone afraid enough to speak, You didn't necessarily have to physically stop them from speaking. You could make speaking feel too dangerous. And that's one of the ugliest lessons in Mississippi's history. During the Civil Rights era, Black Mississippians who attempted to register to vote could face intimidation, beatings, loss of employment, and even deadly violence. The National Park Service documents how activists such as Medgar Evers worked to expose crimes against Black citizens that were too often ignored or swept aside. And then there's Emmett Till. A 14-year-old Black child was brutally murdered in Mississippi in 1955. His mother, Mamie Till Mobley, refused to allow the world to look away. She insisted that people see what had been done to her son, and that decision helped force the country to confront racial violence in a way that could no longer be comfortably ignored. Think about that. A mother loses her child, and instead of allowing society to bury the story along with him, she demanded that people speak up. She demanded that people acknowledge what really happened to her child, the truth. And that is why the situation surrounding Christine makes me think about Mississippi's history. Because Christine is also a mother who lost her child. And she is also refusing to simply shut up and accept unanswered questions. She is saying, I want answers. I want transparency. I want people to take this seriously. And instead of the entire conversation remaining focused on what happened to her son, we increasingly see the conversation become, what's wrong with Christine? Why is she talking? Why won't she let this go? Why is she asking these questions? Why is she going public? And that is what bothers me, because I don't know about you. I don't know how you are when it comes to your child. But as for me and mine, baby, I'm going to the end of the earth. I'm not stopping until I know the 100% truth. And I'm not going to let anyone stop me. Attack my livelihood, attack my character, attack my reputation, tarnish my name. Do whatever you need to do to feel better about yourself. But when it's all said and done, I am not stopping until the truth is exposed. That is what Mamie Till Mobley did. And that is what Christine is doing. And if you have an issue with that, my friend, then 9 times out of 10, you're the problem. I said what I said. Because historically, one of the most effective ways to discredit someone who is demanding accountability is to stop talking about the issue they're raising and start talking about the person raising it. Now, I'm not saying everyone criticizing Christine is participating in some historical continuation of racial oppression. That's too simplistic. People are allowed to disagree with her. People are allowed to challenge her claims, and people are allowed to demand evidence. But there's a line between questioning someone and trying to silence someone. And when a grieving mother is receiving harassment, hate mail threats, and attempts to damage her reputation simply because she continues demanding answers about her son, I think it's fair to ask, at what point does criticism become intimidation? Because the state of Mississippi knows all too well what intimidation looks like. Mississippi has a history of people being told directly and indirectly, don't register, don't organize, don't testify, and don't challenge the system. Don't make noise, don't ask too many questions, know your place. And when people refuse to listen, intimidation was often used to reinforce that message. During Freedom Summer in 1964, Black Mississippians and civil rights workers faced arrest, beatings, bombings, threats, and deadly violence while fighting for voting rights. Medgar Evers himself lived under threats and was ultimately assassinated because of his civil rights work. So when I see a person demanding answers and then watch the conversation shift from what happened to how do we shut this person up, I pay attention, because history teaches us that silence doesn't always happen because someone voluntarily stops talking. Sometimes people are pressured into silence. Sometimes they're intimidated, and sometimes they're publicly discredited. And Sometimes the easiest way to silence someone is to make the public more interested in hating the person than investigating the problem. And that's the part that feels familiar. Again, I'm not saying Christine's situation is equivalent to what Black Mississippians endured during Jim Crow, but the mechanism of trying to discredit the messenger instead of addressing the message is something Mississippi's history gives us reason to recognize. And that's why I don't think we should dismiss it. And maybe it's just me, but the way I was raised, when something like this occurs, even if I don't like you, I do believe you deserve the opportunity to ask whatever questions you need to ask. And it should always be, are the questions she is raising legitimate enough to deserve answer? Even if I don't agree with you, even if I don't necessarily believe your theory, I'm not going to shoot you down or stop you from asking said questions, especially when it involves the death of your child. And that's all I've been seeing lately happen to Christine. And one of the double standards that I truly wanted to point out is that I've never seen, not once, Christine encourage or tell her supporters to go attack the young men who were with my son last, blame them, send them death threats, call them bad names, bully them. But I've seen Heather Wyatt do just that. And I'm still waiting for people to hold her accountable and encourage her to apologize to the minor girls whose life she ruined without evidence, without anything but, I know they're responsible for my daughter no longer being here. And this is exactly where I want to transition back to Heather Wyatt, because this is where the double standard becomes even harder for me to ignore. If we're going to talk about the dangers of public pressure, intimidation, harassment, and trying to silence people who speak out, then we have to be willing to examine how those same tactics have been used in other situations, including situations involving minors. Because when 4 minor girls became the focus of online attention, the conversation wasn't simply about adults disagreeing with one another. And ding-a-dong, these are kids involved in the Nolan Wells situation as well. So, I'm saying that to say this. 4 minor girls became the focus of online attention when Heather Wyatt indirectly released their identities. And these were kids, y'all. There's a massive difference between an adult saying, I disagree with what happened and here's my side, and an adult using a large platform in a way that encourages an online audience to descend upon minors. Heather Wyatt knew the power she held at the time. Her daughter's name was trending. So when thousands of people are watching, commenting, sharing, identifying, criticizing, or ridiculing children, an adult with a substantial platform has to understand the power imbalance. A child doesn't have the same ability to defend themselves against an internet mob that an adult influencer sends their way.
Let's talk about it. This I've gotten over and over that Heather didn't expose any of their names. First, a little disclaimer here. People always say, why are you talking about it? You don't know them. Just as you can support Heather and Aubrey, we all should be supporting and advocating for Aubrey. You didn't know Heather, you didn't know Aubrey, but yet you still have an opinion and you're voicing your opinion and you're, supporting and advocating for them, and you didn't know them. And you have a right to do so, because you have a right to have an opinion. You don't have to know somebody to have an opinion, and you don't have to know somebody to speak about someone. So you can't put that on me. I can form an opinion even though I didn't know Heather and Aubrey, just as you can form an opinion because even though you did not know Heather. We all talk about people. When people post on the internet, we talk about couples, we talk about situations, we talk about famous people, and we don't know them, and we form opinions because we're allowed to and we can, and especially on our own platforms. So I would never tell you not to have an opinion about Heather and Aubrey, and you can't tell me not to have an opinion, and I can speak about it even though it's not in alignment with yours. And I realize I have a big platform, and people like me are supposed to keep their mouth shut, and we're supposed to be politically correct. Well, if you've been here long enough, you know that I'm not, and I will never sacrifice truth to be liked. Never, ever, ever. I'm not interested in that. I am interested in speaking truth, saying truth, and whatever the consequences are, that's fine. And those that like truth and want to hear truth stick around, and those that don't just get angry and, you know, say ridiculous comments, whatever. And that's fine. That's totally fine. But I have screenshots and we're going to talk about it. I'm going to address them because you've asked. And why am I speaking on this? Because it's important to me. While it's fun to make Duncan videos and silly videos, it's also important to me to stand up for something that I believe in. And I believe that there are 4 innocent girls being accused of something they did not do, and their lives have been forever changed, just like Aubrey's life. Aubrey's life was and is just as valuable as these 4 other girls. And I'm speaking up and continuing to speak up because truth needs to come out. And if I can help one person see the truth, then it's worth it for me. And I've received tons of DMs, people who were against me in the beginning, now they see the truth and they're like, thank you for speaking out. So it's worth it. I'm going to keep doing it. I have a platform, and why not? And because I care about it, and I care about 4 girls being wrongly accused when the person accusing them has the truth and won't share it, and has built her entire platform on a lie. So let's get to screenshots. Hold please, I'm sharing, and you can form your opinion on what I share. Okay, so this is Taylor's TikTok account, and this is a comment posted on her account, and this person said, came from your mom's TikTok. So Heather's came from your mom's TikTok. She said we can ask who they were. Was it Molly? Taylor responds with Molly Noblet. So that is indicating that Heather did say she couldn't say the names, but her daughter could reveal them. Okay, take that as you will. Next is a Facebook message between Heather and someone else that I will not disclose. And if you would like to pause and, if you would like to pause and read it for yourself, you may. There she is. She wants it to spread like wildfire. Peyton is not in that list. She comes later. This one is quite important because this is Peyton's TikTok. She posted a TikTok in honor of Aubrey because her and Aubrey were actually very close friends. And as you will see, Heather posted under a comment that she was one of them. At the time, Peyton had no idea that Heather was accusing her of bullying. This was all new. In fact, she went running to her mom to show her this comment, like, what is happening? Because just the other day, Heather was hugging her and telling her she was a great friend. So there's that. Okay, I'm showing you this one because it shows, first of all, if you read it, that Roxy, that's Taylor's friend. So she exposes all the names. And while you can't control what your friends do, you can control comments and on your TikToks. Obviously, she wasn't, but what it shows is that after that, the names were continuously dropped. From that, like from, the first few name drops basically Heather did, and then it just spiraled. And so I just wanted to show you that, just more evidence of the names being dropped, even though that was not directly Taylor or Heather. That Roxy is Taylor's friend, but it started with Heather and then spiraled down. So anyways, it's up to you to form an opinion on that. It's not necessarily up to me to make you believe something, but these are things that I saw. There's so much more evidence, and that just has led to what I believe. And you get to believe what you believe, but hopefully, there are 4 other girls' lives at stake. So I think it's just really important that you know everything before you form an opinion. And I know you guys are going to be upset. I know, but again, I speak on it because it's important to me and because I can. I can just as you can. And just as you didn't know Heather or don't know Heather and didn't know Aubrey, and you're able to have an opinion, I am too, even though you don't like it, even though it's not in agreement with what Heather is doing, I can still form an opinion. But that's it.
I will tag the creator I'm referring to in the description box. During that time, she was one of the only people brave enough to speak openly about what she believed Heather Wyatt was really doing. And even though speaking out and telling the truth sometimes, as she saw it, resulted in her being attacked, she still stood on what she said. I respect that tremendously, because no matter what you're going through, pain, anger, grief, or personal circumstance doesn't give you the right to hurt other people, especially children. And more examples of the double standard. Let her tell her story versus why won't Christine shut up? Heather was given significant room to tell her version of events and gather public support. With Christine, her continued public advocacy and questioning are often framed as attention-seeking, dramatic, or suspicious. She's a grieving mother versus her grief doesn't excuse her behavior. When Heather's emotions were discussed, many people emphasized the trauma of being a mother and urged others to have compassion. But Christine's grief is frequently treated as something that should make her more suspicious if she reacts emotionally, speaks forcefully, or refuses to accept answers she finds unsatisfactory. Protect the children, but selectively. This is one of the biggest contradictions. If children deserve protection from internet scrutiny, that principle should apply to all children, including kids who are accused of doing something wrong. You cannot demand privacy for minors on one side, while rationalizing public scrutiny of minors on the other. Heather's supporters were considered advocates, and Christine's supporters are treated differently. When people rallied around Heather, that could be framed as a community coming together to support a mother. But when people rally around Christine and demand answers about Nolan, they're more likely to be characterized as causing drama, spreading misinformation, or interfering. Questioning one mother was considered harassment, and questioning Christine is considered accountability. There's a legitimate distinction between criticism and harassment, but the standard should not change depending on whose mother is being criticized. If mass online criticism is dangerous and unfair in one situation, it doesn't magically become acceptable simply because the target is Christine. You don't know what happens behind closed doors unless it's Christine. That phrase is often used to remind people that outsiders don't know the complete circumstance of someone's life. That's a reasonable principle, but if we believe it, we have to apply it consistently. One mother gets a presumption of innocence, and the other gets a presumption of bad intentions. This is probably the most important point. The same action can be interpreted completely differently. Heather speaks passionately. She's advocating for her family. Christine speaks passionately. She's trying to control the narrative. Heather asks people to pay attention. She's seeking justice. Christine asks people to pay attention. She's seeking attention. Heather challenges people. She's standing up for herself. Christine challenges people. She's being difficult. That isn't objective analysis. That's interpretation based on sympathy. The larger point, the argument isn't that Heather should never have received support. The argument is, why wasn't compassion treated as a right for Christine as well? And that's it, and that's all. If you've made it this far, I genuinely want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts and perspectives on this particular situation. I know this is a sensitive topic, and I know everyone is not going to agree with everything I've said, and that's okay. But before I go, I want to reiterate something because I don't want my point to be misunderstood. I am not saying Heather Wyatt is a bad person, and I'm not saying Christine is a bad person. I don't personally know either one of those women, so it would be intellectually dishonest for me to sit here and make definitive judgments about their character. What I am saying is that I followed both situations as they unfolded in real time. Nolan Wells' case is still unfolding. And when you step back and you look at the way the two mothers were treated publicly, the difference in the response is difficult to ignore. Both mothers experienced the unimaginable reality of losing a child. Both situations unfolded in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. Yet the public response surrounding these two mothers has looked remarkably different. One mother was met with an enormous amount of sympathy, support, protection, and people willing to rally behind her. The other mother has faced criticism, skepticism, scrutiny, harassment, and repeated attempts to discredit what she has said almost from the beginning. And that's what I'm asking you to think about. Why? What causes the public to look at one grieving mother and say, give her grace, she's hurting, let her speak. But look at another grieving mother and say, something must be wrong with her, why won't she stop talking? Why is compassion so easily extended to one woman but seemingly conditional for another? And I'm not saying Christine should be immune from criticism, and I'm not saying Heather should have been denied support. I'm merely saying the standard should be consistent all across the board. That's it. And once again, you already know. Laesaidit. Until next time, I hope you all have the day you deserve. And remember, it doesn't take much to say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen before I start judging, insulting, and criticizing. Because one day, that could be my story. And I would want people to give me grace.